Hey everyone, this is Sandip back with another video, and today's video is really going to be exciting because we are going to make expanding cards component, and we aren't going to make this expanding card component only in HTML, CSS and JavaScript, but we will take our HTML, CSS, JavaScript, I mean the vanilla JavaScript code to React. So first we will make this component in vanilla JavaScript using HTML, CSS also, and then we will transform or we will migrate or will create that same component in React. So this video is going to be complete hands-on, and think like it's a journey from no framework to framework. So let's directly jump into it. Okay, so this is what we are going to make in this video. This is an expanding card component. So you see here, right? I have different images, and one of the image is like completely visible, and the other images are, so this is a card or the entire image card, and other images are shown partially here. So if I can go on the other images and I can click on those images, and it is going to expand that image and give me the complete view of that particular image. And I have put in some animations also. And if you see here below, this is the title, or maybe like any kind of content that you need to put in, you can put that content for that particular image. So this is a really useful component. We call it expanding cards, but there are so many use cases where you can use this component. Maybe you want to show the images, maybe you want to show some FAQs, or there are so many use cases where this component can be reused. So we are going to start first with HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So let's start with HTML structure of this component first, and then we'll move on and talk about CSS, JavaScript and React. Okay, so let's start with the HTML structure. And to create the HTML structure, I took the screenshot of the application, and just for the sake of understanding, just to understand it easily, it's a good idea, to take the application mockup, or maybe take the screenshot of the application and divide that application into different parts. So obviously we are going to make the expanding cards inside HTML. So the outer area, if you see here, I'm going to use section for that. Right. Inside that section, we are going to have different cards. So this is one first card which will show in expanded way, and the other cards will be collapsed. So everything is going to be called card, and inside that card we are going to have this title, right? So I'm going to call that title maybe a card title, or we can name it whatever we want. So I'm going to create a new project. So on my desktop, I'm going to create a new folder, expanding, or maybe I'll give it a name of expanding cards only, expanding cards. And inside that, I'm going to create 3 different files. But before doing that, I'm going to open that folder inside my code editor. So I'm using VS Code here, but feel free to use any of your favorite code editor. So inside expanding cards, I'm going to create 3 different files: index.html, I'll create index.css, and I'm going to create index.js, because we need to write some JavaScript also, and I'm going to tell you what to write. So let's start with the HTML. This part of the video, we're going to focus on HTML structure only. So I'm going to say HTML5, and I have my HTML ready. I really like this about VS Code. Expanding cards, I'm going to give it a title. And if I go back to my mockups now, then these are really small mockups actually. So this is section, right? So I'm going to have this section. So I'm going to put a section, and let's give it a name, class name of cards, because it's going to contain all the cards. So that's why I'm giving it a class name of cards. And inside this section, I'm going to have different cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or maybe more than that. So each of this box is going to be a card. So inside this, I'm going to create a div with a class name of card. And inside that card, this image, right? So I'm not going to use image tag for it. Instead of that, I'm going to assign a background image to this particular div. So I'm remaining with this title only. And for the title, I'm going to use h2 tag. And maybe, so I need to find out some of the images, right? Which I need to put in here. But I need 5 different cards. So I'm not going to copy paste now because we need to put some images also inside it. And for images, I'm going to use Unsplash. So I will go to unsplash.com. So this is a free resource, where you can go and download the images which you want. And if you see here, there are so many images here. So maybe I'll pick some images from here. So why not go with this one? I need to find out some of the good titles for it. And I'm going to open it. Basically, I need to click on it. I need the URL of this particular image. So I want to see how I can get that image. So I'm going to click on share, and I don't think so. I'm going to copy this URL here and I'm going to paste it here. Let's see what happens. Okay, so to find out the URL, I'm going to right click and open a new tab. And that's how I'm going to get the URL of this image. So I'm going to copy this URL. So this is the image I'm going to use. So I'll come back and I'm going to put style tag. And inside that style, I'm going to use a background image property and URL. And that URL will be the URL which I have copied, right? So I'm going to save and let's run our application using a live server. And right now I'm not able to see anything because I need to put in some style. So, and I'm going to use some title here. So let's find out a good title for this image. So this is the image which I'm using. I'm going to give it the name of, give it a title of golden leaves probably. I'll go with golden leaves, something like that. Or maybe I'll go with L small, or I'll go with a capital L. So you should be able to see something here. See, right? You're seeing the golden leaves here. So I got one image. Let's go for the second one. So I'm going to copy this div from here, paste it here. Second time, let's find out another image. I'm going to go back. This time, maybe I'll go with this image and I'm going to open a new tab. I'm going to copy this one and I need to give it a title, right? So maybe I'll give it a title of living room because it looks like a living room. So I'll come back and let me give it a title of living room. And we need to replace this background image. This is really easy, right? 5 times we need to do this because I'm using 5 different images. So paste, I got the new image with a living room. And now if I go back to my application, you see that, right? I got 2 different images now. Let's go back. Let's close this one. Let's have the third image now. So I'm going to copy and paste. So let's copy this one again, again, and again. So I'm going to put 5 different cards. That's why I've copied this for 3 more times. And next image that we're going to use is, okay, so maybe I'll go with this one. And I'm going to open it in a new tab. Copy this. I need to find out the title actually. So I'll go back and I'll put this image here. First the URL. So yes, save. And let's title this image great photography, something like that. I don't know. I'm using just sort of any title, Great photography. Let's go with next image. I need to find out one more, 2 more actually. And which one I'm going to pick this time? Maybe I'll go with this one. Open new tab, copy this, and I'll go back and I'm going to paste it here. Just need to go back here, delete this one, paste it here, and I'm going to name it tall building. I'm just using I'm just captioning or titling those images based on what it represent visually, right? So this is like the tall building, maybe. I'll go back. I need last one, and that I'm going to pick. I'm I think I think let's go with this one. This looks good. I'm going to right click, open a new tab, copy this one from here, and go back to my Visual Studio Code and delete this one, paste this one. And what's the name of this? Wild animal? Okay, let's go with wild animal as a title. Now, if I go back to my application and if I refresh, right, we are seeing all these, we're seeing the images, some part of the images, and we can see the title also, right? But it's not looking the way I want, right? I want it to look like something like this with one card expanded, right? And there are some collapsed cards with some part of the images, right? So this is just HTML, right? It's HTML we use for creating the high level structure for or a semantic of our application, and we did that, right? Our HTML structure is ready. Now we need to put some colors into it, we need to put some layout into it, and for that purpose we use a very fantastic and beautiful language called CSS. So I think this is a good idea. I mean, let's take a quick pause here and go through this HTML structure, try to understand how I have created the structure, which different tags I have used. I would have used div here, but I went with some semantic HTML elements, like I have used section, then I have used different divs here for the card, and I have given it a name of cards. Maybe you can give it a name of cards container, anything, whatever you want. I mean, these names, I'm choosing based on my preference, based on my understanding, but you can pick whatever name you want. So let's have a quick pause, come back, and we will give some layout to our HTML structure, and let's see how it goes. Welcome back. Now we have our HTML structure ready. We need to lay out our application, and we need to show these images, right? So if I go back to my application, we can see the heading, right? We can see the heading, and we can see the background image also, some part of the image, because I've applied this background image property to, if I come back to my div, right? So this div, right? And this div has a height of this h2 only, right? So we need to give it some height also, just to display our images properly. So let's jump into the index.css file. We are going to write some CSS to layout and to style our application or our cards component, I would say. So first of all, I want to include this index.css file, and to do that, I just need to use a link tag, and this href will be pointing to my index.css file. Now, first of all, I'm going to write some reset for my expanding cards, right? And that we do using the star. So star means I'm pointing to all the HTML elements. So it's going to consider all the list of HTML elements whichever HTML elements I have used inside my HTML, like this section, the body, the div, the h2, right? It's going to target all the HTML elements, and it's going to apply this style. So I'm going to give it a margin of 0 and padding of 0. I'm going to save, and now if I go back, you'll see some differences in the application, right? That spacing between the h2 tags has been removed, right? So that's not there because I said remove the margin and padding, as I've set it to 0. Now let's move on, and before moving on, actually I wanted to use some good fonts instead of using the default font of the browser. So I'm going to use Google fonts for that. Just go ahead and go to Google, search for the Google fonts. You're going to get the first link probably for Google fonts, and I am interested in using this font Roboto. and I'm going to pick something interesting here. So maybe I'll go with this one. I'm going to select this tile. So once you click on select this tile, just you can copy it as a link or you can use it as an import. So I'm going to use import. So this import I'm going to copy from here. So just follow me, just code along with me. Just copy this import URL from here and just paste it here. Something like this. So this is a new at import tag that we can use inside CSS, which is going to import this Google font. Now we have the font. Now if I go back, you'll see the difference in application. Okay, first of all, I need to apply the font also. So that help you're going to get from Roboto, from the Google fonts only. So I just need to change the font family. So I'm going to copy this font family from here and I'm going to target the body tag and I'm going to paste it here. Now if I save and go back to my application, see that? But I'm not able to see that font in a cursive style. Probably I picked up the cursive one, right? But still it's not showing that one. Maybe I'll go with this one probably. I'm going to copy this one from here, Control C, and I'm going to replace it with that one. I'm going to save and let's see how it looks. So I'm going to refresh. Okay, it's showing the same thing. I don't know. Let's sort it out the font part, but I think at least the font has been changed. That's what I can say. The font family is Roboto, and I can see that. Okay, move on and let's lay out our application now. So I want to lay out my cards. They should be like, so if I go back to my application, my cards are stacking on top of each other, right? But I want them to be aligned horizontally, right? One after the other. So to do that, I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to put some default styling for my body element. So I'm going to say display as flex for my body. Now if I save and go back, you see that some changes are happening, right? So my body element has a display flex property now, and I'm going to use align items to center and justify content to center. So this is going to align my application at the center of the page, but not exactly at the center of the page, because if I right click and if I inspect now, and if I go into the cards, so cards is my parent element, right? So if you go into this section, right, it's getting aligned horizontally. It is getting aligned horizontally at the center of the screen, but it's not aligned vertically at the center of the screen because my body has a height of this cards only, right? So I need to increase the height of my body element, and that's going to put this section at the center vertically too. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to give some height to my body. So I'm going to use 100 VH. Now what is meaning of VH? It's vertical height. So basically I'm saying, so say suppose, or maybe I'm going to use, okay, I'm going to save it and see it is coming at the center. So viewport height, not vertical height. I was using the wrong term. Viewport height. So think like your viewport is divided into 100 section 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, something like that. So this viewport height is divided into 100 equal parts. So what is meaning of viewport height? So I'm saying give the target the body element and give it a height of 100 VH, means entire 100 sections. Take all the section. If I give it a 10 VH, it's going to take 10 parts of that particular height only. So think like it is divided into 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 100 units. So I'm taking the 10 units only. So I want to take all the units. So that's why I'm using 100 VH, and I would save, and now it is at the center. So I think this is looking better. Now I want to put all of my cards vertically aligned to each other, one after the other. So that's why I'm going to target my cards element. So if I come back to, okay, I need to open the HTML again. So if I come back to my HTML file, you see that, right? Cards is my main container, the outer container, but each individual card has a class name of card. So this one is card, this one is card, this one is card. So all those different images with h2 element inside them are my cards, right? So I'm going to target this card and let's change its display to flex and you'll see the magic. If I refresh, nothing is happening. I don't know what's wrong. Oh, sorry. I need to target the cards element, not the card. I'm going to say because cards is the container. Sorry. So cards is the container for the card element, right? So I'm targeting the cards. And if I go back now, see that? All of my children. So once you give that display flex property, it takes the each individual card. So if I go back, it's taking this card, this card, this card, right? Each individual card. And by default, flex has a flex direction of a row, something like this. So if I save, you see no difference. But if I change it to column, you'll see the difference. This is how it was previously, right? But I want to put it as a row and see that. So I don't want to use flex direction property because by default it's going to align in a row fashion only. So I think our cards are looking much better now. So I have used as cards and display flex. Now we need to target each individual card element and we need to style them so that they should look something like this, right? And I want one of the card to be expanded that we're going to take care of one by one. So let's go back and I'm going to target the card and each card. First of all, I'm going to target the background. So I put in inside each div, right? I've used this background image property, right? That's why I am able to show that image, but only with the height of h2. So I'm going to use some background image properties. I'm going to use background size property and I'm going to give it a value of cover. So now if I go back, I see some differences and you will soon you will see the image coming in the right size also. Then I'm going to use background repeat. So I just wanted to, I don't want to repeat my background. So I'm going to use background repeat and its value to be no repeat. Now I'm going to give some height and you will see the changes in the image. So I'm going to use ATVH. So this is where, viewport height. So if the height is divided into 100 different sections, I want to pick only 80 sections and that's the height I want to give because my body element has 100 viewport height. Think like I'm using only 80% of it or 80 parts of it. So I'm going to save and now if I go back, you see that all the images, right? They got the height. And if you see here, I'm not taking the entire height of the body element. I can do that if I want. I can go and I can change it to 100 VH and it's going to take the entire height of the body element. But I don't want to do that. I want to use only 80 sections or 80 parts of it. So 80% or I would say it's 80 sections of it. And next, I think I need to give my cards also some of the width. So I'm going to give it a width of maybe 90 viewport height. So I'm going to take 90 sections of my height or I'll go with width this time. So viewport width, viewport height and viewport width. These are some of the different units. So I'm just using VW here. So say suppose now I'm going to save it. First of all, I'm going to save it and go back. And now if I refresh, see that, I mean, if my width is divided into 100 section, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 to 100 here, right? I'm just taking the 80 sections of it, right? 80. 90 sections up because I'm using 90 as value here. Okay. I want to use one more background property here, background position of, I'm going to give it a center. And if I save and go back, so all the images are coming at the center. So this guy, right? If I remove it, let me try to remove it first and show you. So that guy was not coming I mean, that photograph is not, that guy is not coming at the center. So I'm going to use, that's why I have used this background center, background position as center. And now if I go back, you can see that, right? The images are coming at the center. Okay, so let's target my card again. So I'm going to give it a flex value of, maybe I'll go with 0.5. So that will give it all the, if you see, all the images got the right size now. The width is looking similar, right? And let's go with some border radius also. So I'm going to give it a border radius of, maybe I'll go with 50 pixel. This time I'm going to use pixel value. So that gives a nice border to my card. Now let's target this H2 and let's push this H2 down here. So to do that, first of all, I'm going to give position of relative to my cards, and you'll see no changes here. But now I'm going to target my card. Inside that I have a H2 element. First of all, I'm going to give it a color of white. So that looks better on these images, right? And I'm going to give this H2 element position of absolute. So that's going to take out that H2 element out of the card, but it will be positioned relative to my card element. Okay, so this H2 is now out of the normal document flow, but it is placed relative to my card, right? But I want to push it down. So to do that, I'm going to use all those properties, like bottom will be, maybe I'll go with 1 rem, and for the left value, I'm going to go with 1 rem. Let's see how it looks. 1 rem means 10 pixel here. See that? The title, I think it's looking much better. Maybe I want to push it more on the more from the bottom. I'm going to use 2 rem, and this is looking much better. Now I don't want all the cards to open like this. I want some of the, only this one, the first card, to be expanded, and others will be in the collapse mode. To do that, I'm going to create a new class for that, and that class will be the active class. So this active class is going to indicate, okay, so this card is active, that's why you show this card as active. So when I have active value here, I'm going to remove it from here. So that time this card is active, that's why this card is going to be shown in an expanded way. So I'm going to put on the first one for the active. If I go back, I don't see any changes, but now I'm going to write some CSS around my active class. So I'm going to use card, which has a class of active. I'm going to style it. So I just need to give it a flex value. So maybe I'll go with 5 as a flex value, and you'll see the changes. See that? So this card is now expanded, right? And other cards are in collapse mode. If I take this active value from here, maybe I'll cut it from here and I'll put it here. And now if you save, you'll see the second card which is active, right? Looking awesome, right? And I think I need to put some margin here, because these cards are touching each other. So I'm going to give some margin to my card element. So let's give it a margin value. Maybe I'll go with a margin value of 0.5 rem. I'll save it, and this is looking much better, right? And I don't want to show the title, this title on the collapse element, because it's not looking good, because it's cutting off the edge. The title looks good only when the image is expanded. So I'm going to do that. So when the active class is there, at that time only I want to show the title, right? And also I want to, when I'm going to hover, right, I want to show the pointer on all of this cards also. So I'm going to do that. So let's change the cursor for my H2 card. So if you see that, the cursor is coming now. And next, I want to hide my H2, and I want to show that H2 only when it is active, right? So I'm going to make its opacity to 0. So you see that I don't, there's no title is not there. Now when the card is active, I want to show the H2, right? So in that case, I'm going to target card, and when it has an active class, I'm going to target my H2, and I'm going to change its opacity to 1. See that? I can see the title only when my card is expanded. I think the application is looking good. We are good with the layout and the CSS part. Now the next thing is, when I'm going to hover or when I'm going to click on this card, I just need to do one thing. I just need to move this active class, right? From here. So whichever card I have clicked on, right? So that's the magic that we cannot do with CSS only. For that purpose, we will need the HTML. So when I click on this one, so right now this card has an active class applied to it. That's why it's shown in expanded view. When I'm going to click on this one, I'm going to remove the active class from here and put it here. And I'm going to click on this one, I'm going to remove from here and put it here. For that purpose, we need to add some actions into our code. And to add those actions, we have to write JavaScript, right? So let's have a quick pause. We had a good time with the CSS, and let's write the JavaScript for this component, expanded component in the next part of the video. Welcome back. Now let's move on and add some action, some dynamism to our application. So when I'm going to click on this card, any of the card, right, I want it to be expanded and the other one to be collapsed. To do that, I need to target all of these cards, right? First of all, I'm going to use JavaScript. I'm going to get all of my cards and I'm going to add a click event on my cards. And because of that, I will be able to move that active class, which I was talking about, right? This active class. So right now the card 1 is active. If I want to make the card 2 active, I just need to do something like this. Obviously, I can't do it with like this, how I'm doing in my code editor. We need to do that using JavaScript. So first of all, I have my index.js created here. I'm going to include it inside my application. So just before the body tag, I'm going to use script tag. And inside that, I'm going to use source property. And I'm going to point to my index.javascript file. Now, just to check whether my JavaScript is embedded or not, this is what I do. I just see hello. And if I go back to my application and go to the console, we see the hello. So JavaScript is there. Now, I'm going to target all of these cards. I want all of these cards, right? So that I can put click action on it. So to do that, I'm going to create a constant. So I'm going to store all of those cards inside cards, card else, something like that. So I'm giving it the name of card elements. I'm going to use document.querySelector all. So this is a function which is going to go inside a document and it's going to query the document and it's going to select all the element. I'm going to put the condition here. So based on this condition. So I want to go into index.html. I want to go inside that inside this HTML file and I want to target all the cards. I need this div, all the cards, right? And I can query that using the class name because each individual card inside my HTML file has a card as a class name. That's why I've given it the card as a class name. So I'm going to target all the cards. So, hey, document, please query or please go through the entire document and give me all the cards. And just to make sure I'm getting all the cards, I'm just going to log card elements. If I come back, see that? I'm getting the first one, second one, third one, all the cards. I'm getting all the cards, right? Now, I need to loop through all of these cards and I need to add a click event so that when I'm going to click on this card or this card, I want to add that active class inside that particular card. So I'm going to remove my console.log. I'm going to loop through my card else and I'm going to use for each. So for each is again I'm using functional JavaScript. So for each is going to give me the flexibility or the facility of looping through each individual element inside this card element and it's going to return me each individual card. So I'm going to say hey, give me the first card. I'm going to take that first card and I'm going to just log. So this we are just going step by step. Let's see what we get inside each card. So let's see whether the loop is working or not. So if I go back to my console, see that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got 5 different cards here. Now I want to add a click event listener. So I'm going to use add event listener function, and I'm going to listen for the click event. And on click of each individual card, again, I'm going to put console.log just to see whether my code is working or not. Click. So if I go back, if I click, see, it's not working. Uncaught reference error, click is not defined. So card.add event listener, click. Oh, sorry. I need to put string, not the click. So if I click, the click is working. And on clicking of each element, actually I can get the card value also. So on click, I'm just going to see what's my card value, right? So now if I click, you see that I'm getting the first card. If I click here, I'm getting the fifth card. If I click here, I'm getting the third card. Now I just want to do one thing, right? I want to add that active class inside this card div or element, right? So right now I have this card class. I just need to add the active class here. So once I do that, this photo will be expanded, right? This is what we need to do. And I don't want to do it by writing here. I want to do it by the action, right? So to do that, I'm going to say card has something called a class list property, which is an object. And I'm going to add a new class. And that class will be the active class, right? So when I'm going to click on any of the card, it's going to target, hey card, give me all the classes you have and add just one more class into it that called active. Now if I click here, see that? Now if I click here, see that? But something is going wrong here, right? Each individual card, whichever card I'm clicking, it's getting expanded, and I don't want to do that. Actually, whenever I'm clicking on any card, I want to remove the card which has the active class previously. So to do that, I'm going to create a new variable called const previous card. I'm going to create a new variable actually. So I'm going to give it a let, not const, and I'm going to first of all, I'll initialize its value with the first element. So what it's going to do, so the first element, so previous card will give me I'm targeting the first element, right? The first element. So previous card is always going to be the first element, and I'm going to target. So let's go step by step. I'm going to save and go back. I don't see anything here, any change here. Now, when I'm going to click on any of the card, right? I want to first store actually. So I'm going to store previous card is equals to whichever card I have clicked on. So this is going to save that previous card value. Okay, so first time my previous card will be cards 0, and I'm going to do that. Actually, I'm going to give first card the active value, right? So what it's going to do, my first card is always active, and that's what I'm storing here inside my JavaScript file, right? My previous card is always going to be the first card. Okay, and when I'm going to click, I'm going to target that previous card dot class list, and I'm going to remove the active class from the previous one, right? That's how I'm going to get the new, that's how I'm going to add new value to the card element, whichever card I have actually clicked on. Now let's test our applications. I'm going to click on this one. See that? The previous card, which was this one, I have removed that active class from there and put it here. When I'm going to click on this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. This is looking much better, but things are happening abruptly. So I just want to do one thing actually. I want to put some animation. So I'm going to target my card, which has a flex value, right? And I'm going to give it transition, not transform. I need to give transition. And maybe I'm going to target the only flex. I'm going to target flex only. So flex is something which I want to target, and maybe I'll give it a transition of point. Sorry, not here. 0.5, or let's go with 0.3 seconds. So this flex value, whenever this flex value is going to change, it's it's not going to change it abruptly, but it's going to give me some animation. So initially the flex value will be zero point 0.5, but when I click on any active card, the flex value is changing to 5. So it's not going to change abruptly, but with some animation. See that? It's looking much better. And this title, I want to give some transition to this title also when it's going to come. So I'm going to target my H2. I'm going to give it a transition, and I'm going to target the opacity, and let's give it 0.3 seconds only. So whenever I'm going to change the H2, okay, sorry. When I'm going to change the H2 opacity, it's going to animate that opacity also. So then I'm going to click, see that? I think the text is not coming abruptly. Maybe I need to refresh. It's not happening maybe. So I give it a opacity, some transition value. Maybe it's not visible that way. I need to use 5 seconds. I forgot to give the S also, second. That's why it's not visible. Maybe I need to refresh once again. See that? That text is coming with some transition now. So I think we're good. I think we had a good journey around. We have created HTML, we have written the CSS, we have written the JavaScript also to make our application dynamic, right? Now the fun part, now the exciting part is going to come. We are going to take this HTML, CSS and JavaScript, and this is more of, we have created this expanding card using the vanilla JavaScript. Now I'm going to take this component, this expanding card component, and we are going to create this expanding card component using React. Because nowadays, most of the companies, most of the organization, they don't use vanilla JavaScript. They use the frameworks like AngularJS, Vue.js, or reactjs. So let's take this expanded card HTML structure, this CSS, this JavaScript, everything we are going to use, and we are going to write it. This component, we are going to write it using React. So the fun part is in the next part of the video. Let's have a quick pause, come back, and we will write this expanding cards component using React. Welcome back. Now let's get into the fun and exciting part of this video where we are going to create the expanding card component using React. And I took this approach, where I've created this in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So that will give you the idea of how to write code in vanilla JavaScript, how to use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to create the components or create the application. Then I'm going to make those things in React. So that will give you the journey from no framework to framework. And nowadays, a lot of companies use framework, but it's always helpful to know how to create things using a vanilla stuff also, like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And definitely we are going to leverage HTML, CSS, JavaScript in React also, but React itself is a framework. So I've created my application, my React application, using create react app. So you just need to run create npx create react app command. I think you can Google it and you can do it. That's really easy. And the application is running. If you see here inside my browser, this is by default the create react app applications created through that command. It's running here. So we see this animated logo. Now let's jump into it and let's start coding in React. So I'm going to open this project in my Visual Studio Code. So I need to open my Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to open this folder which I have kept on desktop, reactjs expanding cards. So I'm going to open this. Okay, so by default, it creates a lot of files. Create React app. I don't need all of these files. So I'm going to start from scratch. So I'm going to remove all of this and will start working as a clean slate. Okay, so I'm going to create the first entry point for our application, that is index.js. And here I'm going to import React from, I need to import React from React. Also, I need to import React DOM from React DOM. So I don't think so I need these curly brackets here. So I'm going to remove those curly brackets. And I also need something called app, but first of all, I'm going to use my React DOM and I'm going to render something by default. So I'm going to add some divs here with app, and I'm going to render that div inside document dot get element by ID, and I'm going to target the root element. So if I save this, and I'll show you that root element that is inside this HTML file, we have this div with the ID of root. That's what I'm targeting here just to render the app. So if I go back to my application now, and if I refresh, see that we are getting the app here. Okay, so I'm going to keep my expanding cards inside another component. So I'm going to create a new component called app.js. This is general practice we follow. So I'm going to create a new component called app. So I'm going to import React from React here, and I'm going to create a new component called app, and my app is going to return that div which I have created there. So I'm just going to put app here, and I'm going to export default this app component. And instead of using this div, I'm going to import my app here, import app from /app. And instead of this div, I'm going to replace it with the app component. If I save and if I go back to my application, you won't see any difference. Now let's move into creating our expanding card component. So obviously whenever we start with React, we need to first identify the state of our application, because React gives a lot of importance to state. And in our expanding card application, our state is nothing but our images, right, which we have created. So I'm not running that application. Basically, I'll go back and I'll run my basic expanding cards HTML page. So I'm going to open this in my Google Chrome. I'll show you, right? So in our case, all of these images, this title, this is nothing but state of my application. So I'm going to pick up, like, if I open this index.html inside maybe text edit, and I'll show you, right? So all of this, right, this image URL, this active, this is a state, this is also state of a particular card. So I'm going to take all of this data. I'm going to create the state for my application first in React. So that state I'm going to pass to the app component. And maybe, we're going to load that data, that image data from server side. So that's why, I'm keeping that data away from my component, outside my component. So I'm going to create that data here inside my index.js, or probably you can keep that data inside even app also. So probably app is going to load that data. So let's start here. I'll create the state or data for my application here. So I'm going to give it a name of data, or you can name it images also if you want, or we will go with more meaningful name like images. And it's going to be an array, because I need to render multiple images, and this will be an array of objects. And what are the different attributes that this object is going to have? Those attributes we can collect from this, right? So we need a URL, that image URL. So definitely I'm going to pick up all of this data from here. So I'm going to copy this. I'll go back and I'll create a new attribute called URL, and I'm going to keep this URL here. So this is one of the attribute that definitely we are going to have in our data. I need to do some formatting. And if I go back to my application, right, we have a URL. Then if I go back to the HTML, we have something called title. So every expanding card, every card is going to have a title also. So I'm going to create another attribute called title here. and probably the title of this image I'm going to pick from here. So this first one is golden leaves. So I'm going to put that title here. Now, these are the two most important attributes definitely we need inside our data. But this third one also we need, right? And that's whether this card, definitely I'm going to use this data and I'm going to render it in using a React component, which we're going to create in some time. But if I go back to my application here, right, whenever I'm going to click on any of the card, right, that card is either active. So this card, right, this great photography image card is active right now. So that is also the state, right, of this particular card. And all of these other cards are not active. So they are deactivated, I would say, or they're not expanded. So any card which is expanded, I need to have that active state, that active data stored somewhere. So we need something called active also. So by default, I'm going to keep my first image, first card active. And I'm going to put one more attribute which we will need later on, and I'll tell you why we need this one, that is ID. And definitely you're going to get some IDs assigned to images if you're loading this data from server side. So I'm going to save. I got the first object created and we just need to copy and paste this object multiple times. So right now I'm going to render 5 cards. So I'm going to copy and paste it 5 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, and I just need to grab my images from here. So I'll quickly grab the image data from here. So I'm going to control C, not this one, control C. And I highly recommend, you code along with me, because just watching video is not going to help. It will definitely help, but you won't get the complete value of the video. So I'm copying and pasting. So this gives you a lot of muscle memory, a lot of practice, and if you code along with me, you're definitely going to get a real value from it. Let's go with the third one. So I'll go back, I'll copy this third one from here, and I'm going to put it here, paste, and I need a title for this one. So this is great photography. Or probably if you don't want to watch this part of the video, you understand. So I think you can fast forward this part or maybe skip this part of the video. And the next one, I think I did some mistake. This will be my second one. So that's okay. I will just swap some images. So this is great photography. So I'll ID 3, ID this one as 4. And I took the great photography image. Now the next one would be this one, which is tall building. So I'm going to put that tall building here. Paste. And let's pick up the title from here. So this will be again a tall building. And let's pick up the last one, which I forgot to mention as a second one. So this one, which I picked up as a golden leaves. So I'm going to change it to this image. I'm going to pick up this one, Control C, Control V. This definitely requires some work, but at least I have my HTML version, which I am using here. Control V. Okay, I don't know why it's not selecting. Control S. So we have our data created, right? Now the next step would be to take this data, right, and we'll pass this data to our expanding cards component. So I think we have our state ready, our data ready. Let's take a quick pause here, come back, and in the next part of the video, I'm going to create our expanding cards component in React, and we are going to pass this data to that component, and we will render expanding cards component in React. Welcome back. Now we have our state ready. Let's create our expanding card component. So I'm going to go back into my source folder, and I'm going to create expanding cards component. So I'm going to create a new file called expandingcards.js, And obviously I'm going to import React from React, and we're going to create our component. I'm going to name it expanding cards, and it's going to get props. Obviously I'm going to pass some props to it, and it's going to return the JSX, right? So now inside this expanding cards component, actually we can directly copy and paste and use the entire HTML, this HTML. So this entire section actually you can copy from here and you can paste it here, something like this. And you just need to do some changes into this component, this expanding cards component, right? Because this class, obviously this class doesn't work. So you just need to rename it to class name. So I'm just going to do that, class name. But we are using React, right? We're not using static things, and React is a dynamic language. That's why we use React, right? So I don't need all of these divs, right? I just need data so that I can take that data, I can use that data and create all of these cards dynamically. That's what we are going to do. I mean, you can use that HTML entirely here. You just need to do some changes inside this background image and your application will run. But I'm going to follow the right way of creating component in React. So if you see here, this div is getting repeated multiple times. So we're going to use loops, right, to loop through our data, and we're going to get this all of this data. I have already created that data here. If you see these images, so I'm going to pass these images to my application, right? So my application is going to have expanding cards, and I'm going to pass that these images as a data. So expanding cards is going to get something called data from props. So I'm going to create a const actually here, which is going to have something called data, which I'm going to get from the props. And I haven't passed anything like data from here. I don't need the all of these divs. So I'm going to remove it here. And for the time being, I'm just going to put expanding cards, something like this here. And let's export this component, export default expanding cards. And I'm going to import my expanding cards component here on top, expanding cards from expanding cards. Okay, and I'm going to use this component here instead of my app. So I'm just going to return my expanding cards component here. And expanding cards component, I'm going to pass something called data, and data is nothing but our images. So if you see here, if I go into expanding cards, this is a component, right? I'm passing props, and inside that props, I have something called data, and we can check that. Actually, I'm just going to do console.log, and I'm going to log my data. And if I go back to my application, let's see if it is running, and I'm able to see my data. So if I go to console, I think yes, we are getting the data, right? You see this array, right? We're getting all of our images here. Now we just need to loop through all of those images, and we need to render them inside my application. I'll go back, and for looping through our data, we use something called, so first of all, I'm going to check. I'm going to put one condition here. So I'll check whether I'm getting data or not, whether data is there. And if not data, actually, if I don't have a data, if I'm not getting data back, and if data dot length, length, because that's an array, right, is greater than, or maybe like less than or equals to 0, right? This can't be less than 0, but I'm just putting that condition. I'm going to return a message, right? What message I can put? No data to render cards. So I'm going to put this message here that I don't have any data to render. So please pass me data. If there is no data, if length is less than or equals to 0, we'll say no data to render cards. else we're going to work on this return, right? So we're going to check this condition actually. So I'll go back to app, and instead of images, I'm going to pass an empty array. And if I go back to my application and refresh, okay, I don't see anything because I should be able to see, if not data or basically I need to use or condition here, not and. So I'm going to save. See that no data to render cards. So this is working fine. I'll revert my code and I'll pass the images. And now we are getting the images here, and we are going to render all of those images. So expanding cards, I'm going to use this section with the class name of cards. And here I'm going to put my JavaScript expression, and I'm going to say, I'm going to loop through my data. So I'm going to use data.map function. Inside that map function, I'm going to get item, or I'm going to get image. And inside this image, actually, I'm going to get each individual image. I'm going to call it card basically. So data, each individual item is a card for me, and I'm going to take something. I'm going to take this div from here, and I'm going to use this div there. So I'm going to write from scratch. So I'm going to have a div. So let's have a div. So I'm going to render a div. So let's put some space here. I'm going to write div. Okay, it doesn't work like that. Div. And this div, inside this div, I'm going to have this h2, right? So I'm going to put that h2 also inside this div. So h2. So this card, this card is going to have that title, right? Card dot title. So I'm using my data only. So card dot title I'm rendering here, and we need to put some classes also here. So I'm going to use class name, and this is going to have that card class. Okay, I'm going to handle the active part in a separate part basically. So let's first render the data, and we need to have that background image also, right? So I need to put the style tag, and inside that style tag, I need to have that background image, which is this URL, right? This URL I need to put. So definitely I need to use this JavaScript string literal syntax. I'm going to use URL, and inside that URL we are going to get the URL from our data, right? So I'm going to use this and card, and that's there inside my card dot URL, right? So if I go back and if you check your data, right, I'm using this title, I'm using this URL, right, and this active we will handle. So I'm using that URL card.url, and I'm using the title also, right? Similarly, as I'm rendering multiple data here, we need to use the key attribute, and that key will be card.id, right? I'm going to save, and let's see if it is working. I'm going to refresh my application, and it's not working. So the style prop, what error we are getting? The above error occurred in the div component. Error boundary. Okay, the style prop expect a mapping from style properties to values. Okay, I did something wrong with my style. So we need to pass an object here, and which I am not doing. So I'm just going to pass an object with a property called background image. So in CSS we write that hyphen, that dash, background dash image, but when we use JavaScript inside React, we use camel case. So that's one important thing you need to remember. If I go back, see that all our cards are getting rendered, but the thing is we don't have the style, right? So we need to put in some style also. But before doing that, I mean, before putting any style, I'm thinking of doing some refactoring, or first for some refactoring definitely we need to do, but we need to handle the active part also, that I'm going to handle later on. So I mean, instead of having this div here, it's a good idea to create a separate component for this, right? So it's a good idea to have a separate component for this. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take this div from here, and I'm going to move this code into into separate file. So I'm going to create a card component, and that card component we are going to use inside our expanding card. So this is always a good idea to break down your application, break down your components into more smaller components and use them inside your components or application. That's the way we work in React. That helps, writing test cases also, using test driven development and making your application more readable. So I think this here we'll take a quick pause, and in the next part of the video we'll create this card component. Welcome back. Now let's move this div and let's create a separate components. I'm going to take all of this HTML structure from here. I mean, that's this div part, and I'm going to create a new component called card.js. So expanding card is going to have different cards. So I'm going to create a card.js, and again we need to import React from React, and I'm going to create a new component called card, and that card is definitely going to get some props. So this is more of creating the functional component, simple plain React components, right? And I'm going to export this as a default card, and here we are just going to return our JSX, which I've just copied, right? I'm going to paste it here, and let's do some formatting in our code. So obviously I need to replace all of these things. So I'm going to take this. So there's style, and probably I'm going to put this h2, this div here. Okay, and I'm going to take this h2 here. So now all of these things, this card.id, card.url, everything I'm going to get from props. So why not use the destructuring syntax? So I'm going to destructure my values. So I'm going to get the id, I'm going to get the URL, I'm going to get the active value also that I need to use. I'll show you how we can use the active value also. And we're going to get the title also. And everything is going to come from props, right? And props.data, because I'm going to pass it as data or image data, you can call it anything. And let's replace this. So we're going to get the ID. This URL will also be just a URL, and this title, I'm going to remove this card also. So let's pass this data, entire data, right, from expanding card. So I'm going to import my component here, that card component which I have created just now, from /card, and I'm going to render my card component here. So I just need to go back. Let's do a bit of formatting. So I'm going to render my card component, and my card, I'm going to pass data, and that data is nothing but the card data. And now if I save and if I go back into my application and refresh, it's working fine. But we're getting this key prop. Each child in the list should have the unique key prop, because it was here, right? This key I was using here, but now I need to move this key prop from here to my expanding card, because now map, that loop is getting ran against this card components. I need to use that key here, and this ID I'm going to get from card.id. I'm going to save, and now if I go and refresh my application, see that error, that warning is gone. That warning is gone. Now let's move on, and let's talk about the active state, right? I need to have that active, but before that I need to put some styling in my application, and I'm definitely going to pick up those styles from my existing styles which we have created inside our application. So I'm going to open this index.css in text edit, and I'm going to take all of this. So probably all of this style will go into my index or app. So I'm going to put this index.css. I'm going to create a new file. See how we can migrate the existing application. So this is just a small application, but how we can migrate the code. We can reuse the existing code and create and migrate that code into a framework environment, right? So I have created index.css, and I put in everything here, So basically I'm breaking down my CSS also into separate part, and we are going to import this inside index.js. So I'm going to import that CSS, that index.css here. I just need to use the right naming convention here, index.css. And now if I go back, and you'll see some differences probably. See that? I think that body, the font, everything, I mean, look bit different. Now let's go back to our CSS again. And for this cards part, I'm going to put inside my expanding cards. So I'm going to create a new file called expanding cards.css. And inside this, I'm going to put my cards related CSS. And I need some formatting here. I'm going to save, and now I'm going to import this inside my expanding cards component. So I'm going to import /expanding cards.css here. And this should change something related to our cards. See that? Its style has been applied. And the final part which I need to import is the CSS related to my cards, right? So I need to pick up everything for related to card from here until here. I'm going to copy, and I'm going to create a new file called card.css, and I'm going to put everything here inside my card.css. And final thing, I need to import this inside my card.js file, which I'm going to do. Import card, sorry, I need to use card.css, and this should render my application the way I want. Now the only remaining thing is I need to handle that click part and that active part. So let's handle the active part first. So if I go into my card, right, inside that card I'm getting, each card is getting rendered with this data, right, ID, URL, active, and title. So first of all, I need to have my first card expanded, right? And I can do that using that active class. So I need to do it programmatically here. So instead of using this string value, right, I'm going to convert it into an object literal. So obviously I need to have that card class, but that active class is something which I have to generate dynamically or programmatically, right? And I can do that using this syntax. So I'm going to check whether this card is active or not. So if it is active, I'm going to put this active class here. Otherwise, I'm not going to put the active class. So it's really simple, right? So if I go back now, I should see the first card expanded, which is not happening. So maybe I am doing something wrong. So I'm checking whether active. If active, I'm going to put, I want the active class to be there. And card active, maybe I'm doing something wrong here. Maybe I need to check what thing I'm doing wrong here. So I'm using this. I'm getting the active data also. So I'm just checking whether active, and so put the active class, which is not happening. Let me refresh and see if I'm getting the active. I can see the active class here, but I think that active part, that flex of 5 is not getting applied. So why it is not getting applied, I need to see that. Flex of 5 is not getting applied. What is the reason? I'm having the active class applied to all of my cards. So I think I did something wrong with my data. So this is where, debugging helps. So I think I have something wrong with my data because I kept active true for all the different cards. So I need to make this as a false value. This one also false. This one also false. This one also false. Okay. Now if I go back, see that the first card is expanded. Now I need to handle the click part, right? That's the last part of this React component, I would say. So when I click on it, I just need to change. I just need to manipulate my data, right? What I need to change, I just need to change the state of this active value. So this active should become true, and that I can do So I'll go into my card, actually in my card JS, and we are going to handle on click event here. So on click of any of the card, I'm going to call a function on card click. So probably I will say on card click. So this function I'm going to get as a props here from my props basically. So I'm going to write something like this, props dot on card click. And I'll go back to, and where I'm using this card, I'm using that card in expanding cards.js. So obviously I'm going to pass that function from here. So I think I need to put some tabbing here. So I'm going to say on card click, and I'm going to pass that function on card click here. But when I'm going to call that function, I'm going to pass that ID also, because that's why I have put that ID, because I need to check which card has been clicked. And how can I identify that? I can identify that using this ID, right? So I think I need to go back here, and instead of calling something like this, I'm going to use this syntax, and I know I'm getting the ID here. So I'm going to use that ID, this ID which is coming from here, and I'm going to call that with the ID. Actually, I don't need to use that ID here. I'm just going to pass that ID something like this. So when I'm going to call on card click inside my expanding cards, so I'm calling on card click. Let's write this function here. So I'm going to write this function const on card click, and this is going to get that ID right passed. And let's do a console.log here just to see if things are working fine. I'm going to use console.log, just log the ID. I'm going to save. And now if I go back to my application, let's click on this. Let's go to console. See that? I'm getting the ID 543. Now, only thing that I need to do, right, when I click on this, I'm going to loop through that data again, and I'm going to change the active value, right? That's what we need to do. Let me see how much time is remaining. So just to be sure I'm not making the video long, I mean this part of the video, I just need to consider that. Okay, so on card click, I'm coming here, I'm getting the ID. Now the important part, right? Now the next part, this data is coming as a prop, right? Now inside my expanding card, I'm using this props, right? This data, but I need to convert my data into a state, right? Because when I'm going to change that data, this array, right, then only this is going to get re-rendered, right? To do that, I'm going to use a very good feature of React called use state. I'm going to use this function, and instead of having this data something like this, I'm going to pass that data as a state, right? So I'm going to replace this with my state. So const, I'm going to have same data variable, and I'm going to have set data. This is a function. Let's use state. And obviously we are getting this data from props dot data. So initially I'm going to initialize my data using props dot data. I can remove this now. Now I have moved my images data into a state, so my React application will know whenever I'm going to change this data, this state, it's going to re-render the application. And that's what I'm going to do here inside this function. So here I'm going to check. So obviously first of all, I'm going to clone my data, because we don't change the state directly inside React application. So obviously I'm going to create a new state. So I'll say new state, and I'm going to destructure array destructuring. I'm going to use, and I'm going to destructure my existing state. Now I'm going to loop through this new state dot map. I'm going to use map, and because I want to change my data, and this is going to give me the item, each individual item, and I'm going to loop through it, and I'm going to check for a condition if item dot id is equals to the clicked card ID. If that's true, I'm going to change the state item.active state, right, to true. Else I'm going to change the item dot active state false. This simple code is going to do the magic for us. And now I need to set that data using this set data function. So I'm going to put semicolon here. And the last step, I think I don't need a lot of enter here. The last step which we need to do is set data to this new state. And that should do the job for us. I mean, that handling or clicking of the card part. I'm going to save. Let's see, fingers crossed, if everything works. Everything should work fine. So I'm going to click on this. See that? I can click on the card. So by clicking on that card, I'm looping through my existing data and I'm just changing the state part. So I think this looks good. Everything is looking good. The functionality is working fine. So I think we had a good journey of taking the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript part. I mean, we had a journey from no framework to framework. So I think this is it about this video, and we have written a lot of code. And I suggest while watching this video, please create that application in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Also create the React app and write the entire code with me. Then only you're going to get the real value from this video. And I'm going to submit, or I'm going to post, or I'm going to commit all of these files on GitHub. I'm going to post that link in the description part of the video. So please go and look into the code, try to read that code. Reading code is also a very good idea. So I'm going to pause here, or I'm going to stop here, because this is what I want to do, highlight. I mean, this is a new series I would say I've started, where I'm going to take some of the HTML, CSS, JavaScript component projects, and we're going to take a journey from no framework to framework. If you like this video, please hit the like button, put some comment, give me some feedback, suggestion about this video. That will help me, to come up with different video ideas, because I should know like what kind of videos you like. And I think this is a great idea, where taking a vanilla JavaScript code and writing that entire code into React. I'm going to stop here. Once again, I'm saying, and I'll come back with one more project, one more component, or more components, I would say. I just want to see the feedback around this video. So please do that. Like, share, subscribe, and let's meet in the next video. Until then, you take care and goodbye.